Let's use our sourdough bundle and make the perfect loaf of sourdough in our Bosch mixer. What you're gonna need for today is gonna be our sourdough bundle, which comes with 2 lined bannetons. You're also gonna get a dough whisk, 2 bread bags, bench scraper, bread lamb, silicone bread slings, and the sourdough culture. To rehydrate this, there's another video on the website so you can learn more about your sourdough starter. For this recipe, you're gonna want unbleached bread flour, filtered water, and you wanna make sure that it's filtered and not distilled. You're also gonna want some salt, fed starter. So I'm gonna go ahead and set that on my scale and make sure it's zeroed out. First ingredient I'm gonna add is our 700 grams filtered water. We're gonna go ahead and add 20 grams of salt. Add in 200 grams of fed starter. Take our dough whisk from our sourdough kit, and we're just gonna give this a good whisk until our starter's kind of incorporated in that water. Add in 1,000 grams of unbleached bread flour. Now that we've got our 1,000 grams of flour in here, we're gonna go ahead and add this back onto the mixer, and we're gonna put in our stainless steel dough hook. It's really good to use just stainless steel metals when you're working with sourdough. And I'm just gonna mix this for about 3 minutes on level 2. Now that it's all mixed together, you're gonna get kind of a shaggy looking dough, and we're gonna go ahead and add that into a separate glass dish. The dough is gonna be kind of shaggy and it's gonna be really sticky. So we'll let it sit here for about 45 minutes. We're gonna cover it with some plastic wrap. We'll come back and do some stretch and folds. All right, we're back. It's been about 45 minutes. This is what our dough is looking like. It still looks shaggy, it's flattened out a little bit, and now we're gonna do our first stretch and fold. So you wanna kind of lightly wet your hands just so that bread's not sticking to it. So a stretch and folds, this is kind of how you're gonna strengthen your gluten in your bread. You're gonna go from one corner and kind of pick up that side and just pull it up and fold it over. And we're just gonna keep doing that until we get all the way around. And you can kind of see how it's starting to hold its shape a little bit more, and that means that you're strengthening your gluten, which is what you want. Awesome thing about using the Bosch mixer with this recipe is it makes it so you don't have to do as many stretch and folds, because it's actually building up that gluten while it's kneading it in the mixer, which is super nice, and it doesn't take as much time doing the sourdough because I know it's a long process. So we'll just go around a couple more times, stretch it up, and fold it over. So this is about what our dough's looking like. It's holding together a little bit better. It's not quite as sticky. And then we're just gonna cover it again, and we're gonna let it rest for about 30 minutes this time. So now we're gonna do one more round of stretch and folds, and then we'll let this guy bulk ferment. So this is what our dough's looking like. You can see it held its structure a little bit better than last time. So we're just gonna wet our hands one more time and go around and do one more set. We're just gonna pull up this corner right here, and you wanna make sure you pull it up enough to where it's creating tension in the dough, but you're not actually ripping it. So we're gonna pull that up, fold it over, and we're just gonna go around the entire casserole dish doing that. So now I'm gonna let this guy sit overnight, about 8 to 10 hours. Back the next morning, it's been about 8.5 hours. If your house is warmer, your dough's gonna go a little bit quicker. If your house is cooler, your dough's gonna take a little bit longer. So kind of keep that in mind when you're bulk fermenting and stuff. A good way to tell that it's ready is if some bubbles on the surface starting to form and it's doubled in size. What we're gonna do now is we're just gonna lightly flour our clean surface here. This recipe makes roughly 950 gram loaves. Another good way to tell that it's done fermenting is that it just kind of starts falling out of the pan. So now we're gonna shape it. You wanna be really gentle with the dough because you wanna keep its shape and those bubbles in there. So we're just gonna lightly pull it apart, and you kinda wanna get it into a rectangle. So this is another way that you're kind of working your gluten structure in the dough. And you don't wanna get it too thin to where it's ripping. You just want it enough to where you can get it a little bit thin and fold it. Also, if you're doing inclusions, this is a good time to start adding your inclusions. And then once you get your rectangle, kind of like that, I call this the tri-fold cinnamon roll. So you're gonna do a little tri-fold, so you're gonna fold it into the center on one side, and then you're gonna fold the other side over like that, and you're gonna get kind of a burrito shape. And now you're gonna kind of roll it into a giant cinnamon roll. Perfect. So there's your cinnamon roll. Lovely. And now we're just gonna start folding it into a bowl. So like I said, we're gonna do this very gently, and we're gonna be using the palms of our hands, and we're gonna kind of go in like a candy cane shape. Where you're just gonna take the palm of your hand and push it forward, and then you're gonna use your other hand to kind of tuck it. So there's your candy cane, and you'll just keep doing that just to create some tension on the surface here, and just to get a good round ball. And you don't wanna get it too tight to where you're starting to rip the surface. You wanna be gentle with the dough. So you can also see that there's like some beautiful bubbles starting to come out. That's exactly what we want the dough to look like. So I'll show you one more time. So palm of your hand, push forward and come around and kind of tuck with this hand. And you'll just hold it there. You don't wanna put a ton of pressure on this hand where you're like creating more tension with this hand. This hand's just there to kind of hold it and tuck it. And I feel like that's good. You want some good tension, and you can see that it's not just falling, it's holding its shape. Just gonna lightly flour one of our bannetons here, and we'll just go ahead and flip this over. And you wanna put it pretty side down. So seam side up, and we're just gonna let those sit for about an hour on the counter. I'm gonna do the same thing with this one. Now we're gonna let these guys rest on the counter, and we'll let them rest for about an hour. So it's been an hour of these guys resting on the counter, so I'm just gonna do a little stitch to tighten them up good. So to do the stitch, you can kind of see where my seam was right here. So I'm just gonna take two sides, just kind of pinch it, and lightly push them over. And I like to do this after they've set for a little bit, because then that dough gets a little bit stickier. And then I'll just take the two sides right here and kind of fold them over just to keep this a nice round shape. Once we've done that, I'm just gonna take some little disposable plastic shower caps and just stick right on the top. We're gonna go ahead and stick these guys in the fridge. You can stick them in the fridge overnight if that's kind of what your timeline's looking like. I don't recommend putting them in the fridge for over 48 hours, just because they'll start getting overproofed. I recommend at least 4 hours. So we're gonna stick these guys in the fridge for 4 hours, then we're gonna pop them out on our bread slings and start baking them. So it's been about 4 hours of our dough sitting in the fridge, and I like to kind of flip my bread sling up on this so that it just already is lined up and I don't have to guess. And I kind of just like to make sure there's no flour pockets, so I'll just kind of spread it out. And then we're gonna score it, and we're just gonna do a C shape since we're doing round. And if you're feeling fancy, you can do a little wheat stock too. And on the other side, and one on the top. Now we'll do the same thing with our second loaf. So now I've had my Dutch ovens preheating in the oven at 450 for about 45 minutes. So they're nice and hot. So I'm gonna get those out and I'll stick these loaves in there. So I'm just gonna go ahead and gently lay these guys in there. And then at this point, I like to add an ice cube in here too. And I like to just lift up this little bread sling, put it in there. You can hear the nice sizzle. And then we'll go ahead and pop these lids back on, stick them in the oven, covered for about 30 minutes, and then we'll uncover them. So these guys have been in the oven for about 30 minutes. So we're gonna go ahead and pull these lids off. Whew, beautiful rise. So now we're gonna put these guys back in the oven until it gets to the nice brown color that you like. I usually do about 15 to 20 minutes, but you can go longer if you want. Just make sure you keep an eye on the bottom so that it doesn't burn. All right, these guys just came out of the oven, so we're gonna go ahead and pull them out real fast, and we're just gonna set them on this cooling rack. You wanna make sure that you let these loaves sit for about an hour before you actually cut into them, because if you cut into them too early, it can potentially be gummy. So it's been about an hour. A great indicator that you have a perfect loaf is having a great ear right here, and then you can kind of see all the blisters like around here. That's just a good indicator that you fermented your dough correctly and everything went good. Nice and crispy. So now that we've got these cut open, so a good indicator about your crumb is you want to have some bigger holes. You don't want a bunch of bigger holes because that's kind of an indicator that your bread has been overproofed. You want some more smaller holes going on, and so this crumb looks awesome. This loaf I'm actually gonna save for later. I like to put them in my bread bags, and these can last up to a week on the counter, or you can stick them in the fridge and they can go for 2 weeks. And if you guys follow this recipe, I have faith that you can get a gorgeous loaf just like this.